the science of what we understand for the gut-brain connection has changed. They used to think that, for example, our stress or aspects of depression, for example, to use a big word that people don't like to use very much, but it's very real, it is kind of the inverse, meaning it used to be historically that people would say, well, if you're really stressed and you're suffering from depression, look at what you're creating in your body. And we have to treat those effects because of what you've done from this side of it. Well, what they're realizing now is that it's a little bit more the inverse. You still get some of that relationship where if you do suffer from chronic stress, for instance, anxiety or depression, you are going to have some effects in the body. But what they're really realizing is that the body itself, because of the way in which our gut specifically needs to be very homeostatic, it needs to be very in a state of equilibrium, that if that starts to become imbalanced, we start to generate a reduction in certain types of hormones, specifically neurotransmitters, for example, that then amplifies the effect of or the creation of anxiety and depression. So why did I start with that? Well, the reality is that science is changing and that things that we used to think were absolutely true. For example, if you said to your child, you seem to be quite depressed, we need to get you treated for depression, what you're really saying to them is that you're overlooking some of the way in which the body is very capable of handling that and treating it itself, if we can amplify those systems. So I think it's really important that we jump right in, like we're talking about right now, and recognize the fact that the science is changing. The way in which we look at a disease state of any type, whether you call anxiety a disease or not, I tend to believe they are, because that's just the classification. But when you start to get into that state of where a person is struggling, rather than the historical way of saying, let's treat the symptoms, what we really want to be doing today is focusing on how do we stop the cause? What's really occurring in that person, in any of us. And it's going to happen to all of us at different times. In fact, the average human adult will go through periods of depressive cycles multiple times, even in a given day. So just because you cycle up and down doesn't mean that you're suffering from chronic aspects of depression, but you are going to go through depressive states. So rather than saying to that person, wow, your life must be so difficult and stressful, let's get you on medication, let's stop with that a little bit and let's look at ways that we can change the overarching aspect of how that person is living, what they're choosing to eat, how are they choosing to sleep, how are they choosing to think, which is a huge premise of what you do, which is our thoughts can create changes in us systemically simply because of the way we think, and which is so true. So I love that about what you are constantly teaching.
Right. And in that pattern that I like to talk about is that our thoughts are creating our emotions, which then create our actions.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of the reality cycle that we live in, and beginning with our thoughts. So a couple of things that you brought up, it feels good to hear you say that it's cyclical,
Mhm.
that we kind of, the natural tendency for all of us is to have these cycles or moments of depression or anxiety, because I think hearing that might make you feel like, okay, well, it normalizes our states
Mhm.
and can help you possibly have some hope, thinking, well, that's normal. Or maybe the things that get talked about, like, oh, it's a midlife crisis, or like there's certain categories of times of life and seasons that we go through that we're used to maybe some crash points. But hearing you say, well, it's kind of normal, this just happens, that's because of different cycles in our body, or at least the hormone
even
changes
just the
in our
chemistry,
body.
even just a simple chemical change, just to put that in perspective of what you're talking about, how easy that can happen. Yesterday, for example, I could wake up, have a really solid day where I feel like things are clicking the way I really think they should. I don't feel too overwhelmed. My level of anxiety is controlled. Everything seems to be going well, and nothing really happens last night. Let's say last night was great. I wake up in the morning and suddenly I'm starting to feel aspects of significant anxiety because of things that are triggering. And the simple shift in that can be something as simple as the decrease in how much magnesium you've been taking on a daily basis. So something that you wouldn't even think about. You wake up in the morning, you eat healthy, maybe you take some supplements, you do your normal thing, and suddenly you're having a really difficult day. And that day could literally be difficult because of nothing more specific than your volume of free floating zinc or magnesium, which is super important to the brain's production of positive neurochemistry, could have been deficient. And so rather than, again, looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, my life is so overwhelming, my life is so challenging, imagine if you made it a priority every single day to take certain supplementation to make sure that those moments that are going to happen, they're going to feel overwhelming, they're going to feel stressful, don't dictate your life. So for instance, just by increasing the magnesium that a person takes is going to decrease ups and down cycle because you're going to go through them. Let's do our best to decrease them.
So a thought that I was having as you said that is I remember when I had my little babies, I wish that they had some sort of a, thermometer or something to tell me if they were hungry, if they were like what the problem was. And of course they cry and that's a clue, but it's like, well, what do they need? This or that. And we don't know. And in that absence of not knowing, it can be hard and confusing. And I was just thinking, well, gosh, we don't know. We don't have any way to truly, there are more modern, watches and things that can be worn, even the blood glucose devices that can tell us information that's coming. There's a lot more than there used to be, but we also just don't know on a moment to moment basis. You can't just all of a sudden say, well, let me check my zinc levels and then supplement for that. So in the absence of having those types of systems visibly to tell us that our gas is low or whatnot, like you can with our car, I think we probably have to establish some healthy habits.
Habits and systems are critical.
Yes, to be able to support us so that we can be living at our optimal health to live our happiest life. And I know you teach and talk about this a lot. So let's do that. What are some of those habits or systems? You brought up supplementation, but what are a couple tips you could give us so that we can be giving our bodies exactly what they need to have the best chance for success and happiness?
So the first thing I like to do is I like to find people who have written about or taught about how to make changes in our life, and they've taught it well. So for instance, we talk about like habit stacking or atomic habits. You talk about these, different authors who have done so well at trying to teach us trying to teach us how to modify or change what we do, because it's not easy. If we could all make our habits better and do it overnight, we would, and we'd all be incredibly successful, but it's difficult to do. So the first thing that I believe is important is doing something called habit stacking. And that is where you're already taking an existing habit, say brushing your teeth in the morning. And if you want to amplify your ability to, for instance, the effect of certain supplements, and that by the time you go down to the kitchen or wherever you're keeping your stuff that you're going to forget and you only take them every 3 or 4 days, you put them right by your toothbrush. And so that way, for instance, you grab your toothbrush and you grab that new supplement, whatever that is, and you take them together, or you do it at the same time. So you find ways to simply augment what you're already doing because you're good at it. And now all of a sudden you've simply just doubled your effectiveness at that same habit. So that's something that I think is important. The second thing that I think is critical is being realistic about what types of habits we are trying to increase. Like, what are we really trying to change? Because you don't want to go out there and say, holy cow, I want to make this list of all these great and wonderful things so I can be happier. And now all of a sudden you've got 46 different things that you're going to try and include in your day. It's overwhelming. It's a little too much. to do, my suggestion is you find those things that are an absolute priority. There could be only 2 of them, maybe there's 4 of them, but you don't need to do too much at first, but make those a priority. And I would make a suggestion, for example, think your minerals, for example, like your magnesiums, your zincs, your chromiums, those are really important. Don't feel like you need to go out and search for them independently. There are manufacturers of certain supplements that have done a really good job. They've bundled them together for us, and you can just take those all, and it'll have your, like, for instance, your zinc, your calcium, and your magnesium, and it's all going to be together. So that's great.
These are the micronutrients.
Exactly, which
are
are so important. Let me give you another option, though, that I think is also critical, and that is that in the morning, when you're going to be getting your day started, avoiding certain things and replacing it with something else is critical. So, for example, if you like to have breakfast in the morning, which everyone should have a little something to give the body in the morning. Doesn't have to be huge, but it should definitely be pretty, healthy, fat focused with some protein, and some clean and some additional clean carbs. Like, you just want to be careful what you're eating. But the most important thing would actually be omega-3. Omega-3 is critical, and in the morning, because omega-3 is going to help the body reduce inflammation. So if you wake up in the morning and you feel kind of achy or sore and tired, omega-3 is going to help reduce that. Omega-3 is also critical because it helps to motivate the body to build certain neurotransmitters that make you feel happier. So you want to start your day happy. So you're taking your other micronutrients, like she said. So you've got your zincs, you got your magnesium, those are important. The next thing is your omega-3 supplement. That's critical.